I'm Ernie Humphrey, Educational Programs Leader for Performative. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, 5 Best Practices of Effective Budgeting and Planning from Theory to Practice. Advances in technology are creating opportunities for companies of all sizes and across all industries to realize the benefits of creating better alignment of budgeting and forecasting efforts with strategic initiatives and operating in a dynamic financial planning environment. Today's webinar will focus on how companies are leveraging technology and redefining processes to offer the right data at the right time to the right people within their organizations. Our content today will focus on illustrating 5 key best practices in strategic financial planning in action. And we will begin with a discussion of the theory behind these key best practices. Today you'll discover how leading practitioners are improving core processes today and building strategic business value for the future. I would like to thank Adaptive Planning and NetSuite, whose commitments to thought leadership helped make this webinar possible and delivered at no cost. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we'll hear presentations from each of our featured speakers. Then we'll move to the interactive Q&A session, where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We'd like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we'll do our best and we'll follow up afterwards with any questions we did not get to. A few logistical notes about today's webinar. A link to today's presentation and video recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. Those who would like CPE credits through NASBA will need to answer all 3 polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit. For any questions on CPE credits, please send an email to cpe@performative.com. Again, we encourage you to ask questions on today's topic at any time via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time during the webinar. Finally, we ask to take a short survey today regarding today's webinar. At the conclusion, we greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. A quick word about Performative. Performative is the largest online community resource for senior-level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related leaders. Performative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice on insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges they face every day. Okay, let's get started by introducing today's first speaker, Bill Aiken, Principal and CEO, Abacus Group. Bill has extensive experience in helping companies of all sizes achieve their growth goals. He is the founder and CEO of Abacus Group, a boutique consulting firm focused on corporate performance management. Bill gained significant business operations experience while working for 10 years at PepsiCo and Frito-Lay with their finance, sales, and marketing organization. When Bill left PepsiCo to launch Abacus Group, he was the finance director for PepsiCo's $7 billion strategy grocery channel. Prior to PepsiCo, Bill worked for a small B2B company in Dallas, Nortel and Richardson, Texas, as well as a major consulting firm, Anderson Consulting, in Washington, D.C. Bill earned his bachelor's degree in economics from Washington University in Lexington, Virginia, and his MBA with a concentration in finance from the University of Texas at Austin. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Bill Aiken. Bill, please take it away for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ernie. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I appreciate everybody joining us today, and thank you for both NetSuite and Adaptive Planning for sponsoring this presentation today to make it available to everybody. I'm going to be providing some introductory remarks, and then Eric Zimmerman will be giving some real-world examples of his experience on implementing these best practices at Infusionsoft. So for starters, just a little bit more background on Abacus Group. So we've worked for a wide variety of clients in many different industries, from consumer packaged goods to manufacturing, services, high-tech, not-for-profit, etc. We're an implementer of adaptive planning software and have been implementing adaptive planning software for a long time, so across 100 different client projects today. The principles I'm going to speak to today can apply to you regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what size of enterprise or what size company you're in, and I've seen these principles work well whether you're Fortune 50 or if you're at a company that only has tens of millions of dollars in revenue. So we have worked with all shapes and size companies. Why is this of interest of you today? So you really want to try to understand your role within the finance organization and how you can move along this continuum from stage 1 down here on the left-hand side up to the more evolved stage 4 within your finance organization. Doing this is going to help your career personally. It's going to help your company achieve better results, and it's probably going to lead to more interesting day-to-day job responsibilities for you if you can do these sorts of things. So very key, very important to do this. Also, various third-party studies, they may not bucket the buckets exactly like this, but in terms of benchmarking business results for finance organizations that can move from stage 1 to stage 4, we'll see significantly improved business results, and that can be measured along various metrics, whether it be revenue growth, earnings per share growth, market capitalization growth. All the different key financial metrics for finance organizations that are doing these sorts of things in moving from stage 1 to stage 4 will all be improved as you move through that continuum. So let's talk a little bit about the 4 different stages here. So most finance organizations for small companies will start off here on the left-hand side, where finance will mainly play the role of managing transactions. So the basic blocking and tackling is going to be the primary spend of time for the finance organizations in that stage. Typically, it's going to be accountants that are going to be focusing on getting just the accounting correct within the ERP system within the accounting package. You may have some basic planning going on in the form of an annual budget, and so that's typically going to be dominated by just general ledger projections of what you think your general ledger account balances might look like in the upcoming year, and maybe have that sliced along department lines or something related to that. But not a whole lot of detail above and beyond that, not a whole lot of drivers or anything of that nature, and just an annual process. And then also you'd be focused on financial accounting, just getting the numbers pulled together to understand what the income statement, balance sheet, cash flow look like in terms of looking at the rearview mirror, and not a whole lot above and beyond that. So that's stage 1. Stage 2, you step up to stage 2 when you begin to think about helping to control the business, and here finance begins to take more of a role of helping out with the underlying processes within the organization, focusing on improving some of the reporting capabilities, and then also helping to minimize risk. Typically what we'll tend to see is clients that have achieved this stage will start to get into variance reporting. When we close actuals each and every month, we're going to go back and be able to compare how did those actuals compare to the original budget that we had laid out at the beginning of the year, and try to understand some of the reasons for that variance. Finance is also likely to layer on in this stage some of the more advanced function capability in terms of tax, audit, and treasury. So kind of rounding it out, it's not purely simply financial accounting at this point, but we're adding on additional capabilities to the finance organization. Stage 3 is where it really starts to become interesting from a financial planning and analysis perspective. Finance begins to play the role of leading the decision support process throughout the entire company cross-functionally. Finance is looked to provide an objective and sound basis for making decisions, be that for sales decisions, marketing decisions, operations decisions, and we'll likely start to get into some things like rolling forecasts. So no longer are we simply producing an annual budget, just one point in time throughout the course of the entire year, but begin to take a look at what is the latest outlook at the numbers as the environment changes, as key drivers change throughout the year. You are likely to begin to put into place some sort of rhythm and routine around corporate performance management capabilities here. So there's likely to be quarterly business reviews that finance plays the key role in pulling together the agenda for that. And within that context, there's going to be further analysis of drivers above and beyond just the financial metrics, starting to get into what are the operational drivers that move the needle and move the numbers. So many companies will have achieved stage 3. There are only a few that have taken it all the way to bright to stage 4 of having integrated functional excellence. And here is where finance is really playing the role of a business leader, creating the guiding light, kind of the headlight, if you will, to look out into the future and help be the glue that pulls the entire organization together. Finance typically has the capabilities to do that in a unique way that the other functions cannot, being at the center and being able to play the role of the objective party when quite often the other functions may be biased towards their own self-interest. And so finance can really play that role of helping guide all the strategic decisions and the operating decisions. Here, as finance is trying to play that role, it's key that they're enabling enterprise-wide collaboration, so enabling visibility into the insights that the different functions have and trade-offs that are needing to be made to move forward and execute, and empowering the business units themselves to begin to dig into self-serve analysis so that not all the data queries, not all the analysis requests are having to come through finance and have finance be a bottleneck and also not being freed up to add additional value in terms of providing more value-added analysis. And then finally, you know, we try to think about enabling what-if planning in this stage. So not just simply having one center-cut forecast, but starting to take a look at having different scenarios within a particular forecast cycle. So maybe you might think about it in terms of what's my best case scenario, what's my center-cut scenario, what's my worst case scenario in terms of the various drivers that go into that forecast, and seeing what's going to happen if you toggle those key drivers, what's going to be the financial result in the end, and how would you make different decisions around staffing, around capital purchases, around pricing, all those key decisions that impact the financials at the end of the day. Okay, so what we tend to find is that left to the traditional devices of just Excel and General Ledger that's not directly connected to Excel, it's hard to do those things and move up the scale from stage 1 to stage 4. Particularly as you start thinking of moving into stage 3 and stage 4, you need to look at technology to help automate some of these solutions. So the best practice number 1 is to think about being able to integrate your ERP or accounting system and your planning application. You know, I'm actually in the process of working with a couple clients right now that have not yet done this, so we're working with them still in Excel environment. And you know, I'm sure many of you on this call today are still living in that old Excel environment where when you want to import actuals into your forecasting, planning, budgeting models, that takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. So I've got clients that they might have 25 different Excel spreadsheets representing different departments or profit centers or cost centers, and dating all those different spreadsheets every month for the forecast process takes a tremendous amount of time and effort and is not particularly value added. So the first best practice here is going to be able to integrate your ERP or accounting system with your planning application. And NetSuite and Adaptive Planning have really made that easy to do in one integrated application. Best practice number 2 is to enable yourself to be able to adapt to business changes, and Eric's going to go through some specific details of this later, but what you want to be able to do, and it may not simply just be focused on accounting ERP data, you may want to begin to pull in different operational data and enable real-time consumption of that data. So pushing information from a sales system, from an operations system, even from an HR system sometimes, into a planning application, giving visualization around that information, around that data to people who are in the position to make decisions and adjust to the evolving business environment out there is key, and being able to do that quickly so that you can beat your competition. Best practice number 3 is to expand your business drivers. So typically what we'll find when we come into most clients is they are down in that stage 2 of being able to plan out most of their business. They're really primarily looking at general ledger accounts as they're pulling together their budget or their financial forecast. And what we like to do is begin to focus on what are the most key portions of your income statement, your balance sheet, your cash flow model, and let's figure out what the business drivers are that move those key pieces of your financials. The financials are obviously downstream in terms of the overall process. So usually they're lagging indicators in terms of performance, and we want to think about what has to occur upstream in terms of really driving the financial numbers at the end of the day, and then build that logic into your model so that you can be modeling out those key drivers that ultimately result in some sort of a financial impact on your income statement and balance sheet. So thinking about from a revenue perspective, it could be pricing, it could be bookings, it could be your sales pipeline coming over from a CRM system. In the personnel world, it could be things related to hiring decisions. You may have to-be-hired positions that you want to evaluate. Okay, do we really have the resources to be able to fill all these open roles today? If we do that, what's the impact going to be across the entire P&L, not just our salary expense, but linking that in logically to other lines on the P&L, payroll taxes, computer equipment, and so forth. So you want to be able to identify the key drivers for your business, understand what the key performance indicators are, and all that will flow ultimately downstream to the key result indicators in the financial statement, but those are more lagging indicators. Best practice number 4 is to improve collaboration. So quite often this is a challenging thing to do within an Excel-only planning and analysis environment. Spreadsheets inherently are not collaborative by nature, so they tend to be stored on somebody's hard drive on their PC. In the best environments, they're stored on some sort of shared drive or maybe on SharePoint or something along those lines where you can have some level of collaboration. But at the end of the day, it's still very difficult to achieve a level of collaboration necessary to make quick decisions and share information throughout multiple functions. And so what you want to be doing and leveraging technology for here is improve the ability to share not just simply the quantitative information, but also some of the qualitative information that helps describe the narrative around the numbers, and that can come in the form of providing note-level detail on inputs and assumptions related to the drivers that have been input, to commenting on the variance analysis in a way that it can be socialized throughout the organization through common reporting repository that multiple users have access to, but there's still security privileges that protect confidential information, only able to be seen by those that have the right privileges to be able to see that. And so technology can really help with that achievement of that best practice. And then best practice number 5 is to empower the end users who are making the decisions at the end of the day. So we don't want to keep all this information in a silo within the finance organization and have the other functions have to pass through finance to get access to that information. Instead, we want to free up finance's time to add more value-added analysis, to be more strategic. And to do that, we need to enable the end users to be able to access information themselves directly, being able to perhaps build a report on those key drivers and see how that relates with the financial metrics. So be able to build reports themselves through an easy user interface, or be able to have a planning interface that's multi-dimensional, enabling you to select different products, different customers, for example, in the planning environment, but having that environment be easy enough that somebody who doesn't have a great deal of technical knowledge or a great deal of financial savvy can input data, analyze the data, and see how the different drivers that they're inputting may impact the key result indicators downstream. So all of that, like I mentioned, is hard to do within an Excel environment. Most companies out there are still leveraging Excel to do these sorts of things. It's the most common application used to do the planning and analysis. One of the big reasons for that is people are very familiar, very comfortable with Excel, and they view it as being low cost. And and so because of that, it tends to be very prevalent. But it's important to realize that, and many of you I'm sure have experienced this, that it can be very manual and slow. So I'll give you an example. We implemented adaptive planning at a client that had a very large, complex planning spreadsheet where they would need to update some of their key drivers. It's a very good spreadsheet, but they'd update their key drivers, and they had a standalone PC with 4 processors running the model, and it would take 6 to 7 hours for all the calculations to run throughout all their many cost centers and general ledger accounts, their 3 financial statements, and so forth. So Excel can be slow and inefficient in that regard. It can be very error-prone, so I'm sure many of you have seen as you try to engage other functions in the planning process. If you send out spreadsheets, you may have somebody input a new row, bust the model, and it becomes very difficult for finance to consolidate at that point. We've talked about collaboration. Excel doesn't scale very well. You're going to get into problems with linked spreadsheets. And just the other day with a client where we had 20 different linked spreadsheets. Excel, 75% of the time, links will work great, but 25% of the time, those links get messed up, and you have trouble scaling across multiple departments. And it's obviously not secure. While there's some level of encryption, you really can't control who sees what within one model. So it's not good for trying to manage an enterprise-wide model. To address all these shortcomings, over a decade ago, there were different people who came together and created planning applications that evolved over the course of time, but were all what we call on-premise applications, where you basically had to purchase the software, put it on a computer or a server at your own company, and those applications dealt with many of the issues that Excel had shortcomings on. So Cognos and Hyperion Planning and SAP BPC as examples are all applications that help address some of the issues of Excel and help companies achieve some of the best practices that we talked about on the previous slide. Those are good applications, but the problem that a lot of potential prospects who are looking at these applications will mention are, hey, you know what, these are really expensive, and that expense can come in multiple forms. The software itself can be expensive. You have to purchase standalone servers quite often to run these applications. So, a Hyperion planning environment, you might have 3 or 4 different servers required to run that application across a print server, a test server, a development server, and so forth. So you have to buy hardware to run it. And then quite often you're going to have to also have 1 to 2 full-time administrators. You might have a technical IT administrator and then a business administrator to keep the models running smoothly and properly. So very high cost overall when you consider software, hardware, and the ongoing maintenance. They also take a long time to deploy due to their complexity. So they're powerful, but they do require some degree of coding, and so therefore are slow to deploy and expensive to deploy. They can be hard to use for the business user at the end of the day if you have to get in there and try to figure out how to change some of the code or modify the cubes in a multi-dimensional planning environment. And you almost certainly are going to have your IT organization involved in both getting the application up and running and then maintaining it. Because of all these reasons, there were various vendors out there that have launched cloud-based applications. Obviously, Adaptive Planning, one of our sponsors today, is one of those. And today, based on the literature I've seen, Adaptive Planning has more customers than any other cloud-based application out there today, and has very high degree of customer satisfaction above and beyond the legacy enterprise solutions out there. And the reason for that is it's very easy to use for whether it be a finance end user or a business end user. You don't have to get IT involved because it's so easy to use. It's quick to deploy. You can be up and running in a number of weeks, maybe as quickly as in some cases we've implemented in 4 weeks, but more likely on the order of 14 to 16 weeks. It's a very collaborative environment, so users can log in from wherever they are in the world through their web browser onto the cloud and see the latest and greatest numbers. Because it's built on the cloud, it takes advantage of the scalability of modern database technology that the legacy enterprise systems use. So it gets you out of the unscalable Excel environment. And in a software as a service-based application, it's a subscription-based model. And so adaptive planning, for example, will continuously be innovating, coming out with 3 to 4 new releases a year, and all of the subscribers of the application automatically get access to that innovation as part of their subscription. So cloud solutions really have taken on the forefront, achieve rapid growth, helping to address the shortcomings of Excel and helping end users adopt the best practices that we talked about. Okay, so now we're going to transition over to a polling question. So I think Ernie is going to go into that, and then we'll be passing the baton over to Eric to talk about how he put into place some of these best practices that we've talked about.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill, for the great content and for setting our stage up so well for Eric. You gave us all the theory behind the best practices, and now we're going to look to Eric after we launch our polling question, read his bio to enlighten us on how those were put into practice. A reminder for those of you after CPE credits for today's webinar, you need to answer all 3 of the polling questions during the webinar. Of course, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions. Time permitting, we will review the results of the polling questions and get comments from our speakers during the Q&A. Again, we encourage you to please ask questions on today's topic via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time during the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and leave the poll up by just another 10 seconds or so. I'm going to go ahead and read Eric's bio. So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Eric Zimmerman, Manager of Financial Planning and Analysis, Infusionsoft, with close to 15 years of budget and planning experience. Eric joined as Manager of Financial Planning and Analysis for Infusionsoft in 2012. He is currently the Adaptive Planning Administrator and owner of the budget and planning process for Infusionsoft. Before arriving in Infusionsoft, he worked for AMD in both Sunnyvale, California and Austin, Texas. At AMD, he spent time as a global consolidator and created AMD's long-range plan model. He also worked as Manager of Planning and Strategy with Match.com in Dallas, Texas. With Match, he consolidated North American flagship product as well as created financial plans, metrics, and reports for Match.com mobile product division. Most recently, he worked for SMSC as Manager of Financial Planning Analysis in Chandler, Arizona. His responsibilities were budgeting and planning for 4 district international product lines. He also has extensive system experience with SAP, Hyperion, NetSuite, Adaptive Planning, and is a self-proclaimed Excel geek. He received a business finance degree from Brigham Young University and an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to go ahead and hand the floor over to Eric Zimmerman, FP&A Manager. Eric, please take it away for us.
All right, so I appreciate this opportunity to talk more about where the rubber hits the road when it comes to best practices. A little bit of background on Infusionsoft. We are the only all-in-one sales and marketing automation software for true small businesses. And when I say true small businesses, I mean 2 to 25 employee type businesses. Because of this, we're experiencing very rapid growth. We have more than 60,000 users, and our employee base, which is part of this best practices, our employee base is pretty much doubled over the last 1.5 to 2 years, and so it's created some interesting challenges, especially from the budget manager, owners, directors, and executives, which is a wonderful problem to have for sure. Let me see here. Am I going the wrong way? I am. So the challenge that I came on in October of last year, and the challenge that faced us, which were good challenges to have, but we had a CFO and our controller who were very busy in our Series C funding exercise, which we were able to secure some good funding from Goldman Sachs in December. But what that necessitated was myself coming on, and they basically handed me the reins to adaptive planning, which I hadn't at that point had any experience in. Most of my history was with large ERP systems, SAP, Hyperion, and also Excel. And so when I came on, they said, okay, we have Excel is really our tool for planning. We have adaptive planning, but why don't you, what we usually do is just copy and paste our Excel stuff into adaptive planning, and adaptive planning at this point is just a repository for our budget versions. And they knew the value of getting out of that copy-paste trap and moving forward into a true cloud-based type solution. So over the course of about 5 weeks, I had a crash course, kind of drinking through a fire hose type thing, with adaptive planning, and integrated and got out of Excel. I don't think I opened up an Excel sheet all through that 5 weeks, and got everything into a cloud-based solution in adaptive planning, and rolled out the full annual budget for, at that time it would have been this year's 2013 in adaptive planning in about 5 weeks. I got hired towards the end of October, and it was the beginning of December that our board of directors meeting was to, I needed all the information for the board of directors meeting. So that was the challenge that was faced, and what we ended up, moving forward was, taking the core business, the Excel hell, if you will, and moving that completely over into this environment where we could do balance sheet, income statement, cash flow planning. As everybody knows, cash is king, and especially when you're in the mode that we're in, we needed to have some good, accurate cash forecasting throughout the year, and then 1-2 years after. So what we have we are a cloud-based company, and so our drivers in our budget cycle really are people and any investment that we make in marketing. Those are the largest drivers, and because of that, most of the stuff that we spend money on, we can plan at an annual level, and we know what we're anticipating. The big variances obviously are units, revenue, and the ability to add and acquire talent in a timely fashion. The requirements that we had for the board of directors and our executive team were very similar to the requirements that were asked of us in a large environment such as AMD. The same type of analysis, the same robustness of information was required in a 400 person operation as opposed to a 15,000 person operation. But I was finance employee number one, and it created quite a bit of a challenge for me to provide the same level of service that I was used to, being a small key in a big wheel, to really running and directing the operation of financial reporting, planning, and consolidation. And so really using the cloud-based solution, not only with the ERP, so we have NetSuite, and then we have adaptive planning as our planning engine. So having these two things integrated has really helped streamline. One of the things that I hate most of all is the copy-paste. It's taking one person's Excel spreadsheet and copying and pasting the information into another format. And that was one of those things that I tried to eliminate as much as I possibly can within my own organization, but also as a company. That was one of the things that I wanted to eliminate. And my experience is when plan turns to actual, and then you're copying actuals into the formats that you need it, and taking it out of a data dump and then some ifs and VLOOKUPs and pivot tables to get it into the right format for an executive team. It just, having the integrated, both the ERP and the planning engine, I know specifically with the NetSuite Adaptive Planning relationship, it really is push button to get it in to the actuals, getting actuals out of the ERP system and into the planning system. And there's mappings, and when a new account comes up, that's another wonderful thing. When a new account comes up, it alerts you, hey, there's a new account. So you don't have somebody in another location say, oh, I need a new account, adding a row into the Excel spreadsheet, and then now it blows up your consolidation model. And so, it really helped with the efficiency of taking something that took weeks to report our actual results to days. And in fact, I just experienced this. We had our quarter-end close. We had our accounting team last Tuesday say, okay, the quarter's closed, and I had a day and a half to produce all of the information for the executive team, the board of directors packets, managerial reporting, and it's something that is very easily attainable because there's not all of that wasted time in the copy-paste, in the making sure that this cell is linked to the right spreadsheet in somebody else's shared drive. And so it's really helped to streamline. It's helped to really put forward a centralized source of truth with budgets, forecasts, actuals, variance analysis, and scenario planning as well. It's a single source of truth, so I can point and direct all of the directors and dollar budget owners to this single source of truth. So it's been a wonderful thing to have this integration and to have it in the cloud. I mean, there's a lot of advantages of being able to have a sick kid at home and being able to work from home and have all of the information at your fingertips and not have something sitting on somebody's desk or their hard drive. So the other piece that we've been able to do is really break down the information, the barriers of information. This was one of the things that when I came on, I sat in enough executive meetings, and the first 10 to 15 minutes were executives saying, well, that's not my number, and somebody saying, well, that's not my number. Where did you get your number? Oh, and so it stopped that because we were no longer running from two different people's spreadsheets. It really, everybody was able to see it on the screen at the same time. They were able to log in. They were able to know well in advance of the meeting what the numbers were. And so we were able to really hit the ground running in our budget cycles, in our monthly close variance meetings. And really, when I came on in October, besides producing this budget with the CFO and the controller locked up in our funding efforts, it took me about 3 weeks from close to producing the reports because of all of the manual Excel work that was to be done, and obviously there was a learning curve as well. But really now it's a 1 to 2 day process in verifying, analyzing, and reporting the results. And I spend much more of my time analyzing the data and getting the questions from the directors and really looking at the heart of the data rather than copy paste and making sure this link works. And so it's been a wonderful thing, and because the company was in such a need for this type of efficiencies and really leveraging the power of an integrated ERP and planning system, it was a shock to me. But about 6 months after I got hired, I was awarded the Employee of the Month, which at Infusionsoft is kind of a sweet deal. I got the keys to a Camaro Super Sport. And it was neat to see that a finance person could have such an impact, and it's basically because there were no more barriers. It wasn't sitting on somebody's spreadsheet. It was out in the open. The information was there, and they had faith and confidence in the information that was being provided. The other aspect is with the changing, and I alluded to this with the tremendous amount of growth in our headcount and people leaders and directors, one of the things that they talk about is the directors today have more headcount and budgets than the executives had 2 years ago. And so because of this explosive growth and the business changes, there's a lot of what-if planning. There's a lot of scenario planning. We're going through our 3-year cash flow projections, and it really helps to have a single source of truth once again, using adaptive planning to help model these different scenarios depending on headcount and depending on growth rates in revenue and unit growth rates. What really is the state of the business going to be? The other piece of it is we've got a very demanding, very performance-oriented culture, and so the CFO really wants near real-time information, and so this allows us to have that real-time information between a planning and a ERP system. The other piece of it that was a changing environment is when I came on my first company-wide meeting or with the managers, the question that I posed was, all right, managers, how many of you know what the 3 financial statements are in a company and are familiar with them? And because of the rapid growth and the homegrown nature of the management staff, about half of them raised their hand. So I knew that I had a job to help educate and help get the managers and the budget owners up to speed with financial terminology, with just general basic business acumen. And what I was able to do is with the use of adaptive planning in NetSuite, create the reports that they would be reviewing, and so then I can sit down and spend half hour, 45 minutes with them, a new manager, and say, here are the reports that you need to look at. This is the information it's going to tell you, and if you have any questions, let me know. And I've been fairly successful in getting those who need it up to speed with the use of an easy-to-use integrated system. And it's really helped increase the productivity. It's helped to get, one of the things that I tell the managers when I sit down, I say, look, don't be afraid of numbers. Numbers, when you walk into a doctor's office, the doctor will give you blood pressure, your pulse, your oxygen level, your height, weight. All of these are our numbers, our individual numbers, but it tells the doctor a story. And so that's really what when I educate the managers, I say, look, these are the stories of our business, and so let's get to the story. Instead of learning, Excel formulas, we're now getting to the story of the business because the numbers are right there for you. And so that's really helped increase company-wide the adoption of financial performance metrics, data-driven decision-making, and it's been something that has really helped create this team environment, if you will. When I came on, we had about, if I remember right, we had about 25 users of adaptive planning, and it was really executives and some of the more senior directors that had access to adaptive planning. And over the course of this last year, that's increased. I think I'm close to 50 now, with managers having access to their individual budgets. And that's the other thing that I like about it is you're able to limit what these managers view. So there's no consternation with me once I've set the manager up and given them the right permission that they're going to be seeing the salary information of somebody else or another department, or they're going to overwrite data that one department has put in. And so that's been a huge help, and I've been able to train them on how to look for variances, how to dig in, with the integration of ERP and the financial planning. They're able to drill into the actual journal entries, the actual bills and invoices, because there's that connection between the two. And so there's a lot of that pent-up demand and pent-up demand for information is solved by having these managers with the ability and the tools and the resources to have that data readily available. And really where we're moving and kind of the next step with our transition is expanding the business drivers, is really, we have lifetime value, we have churn, retention, revenue retention. We are exploring now more of the data that we have available. So looking at these key performance metrics by channel, by region, by industry type. As you can imagine, having over 17,000 true small businesses, we have anywhere from somebody who's baking to somebody who's a national speaker. And so there's a lot of these different industries that we serve and we cater, and so we're utilizing that data to extract it from our ERP system and then be able to model it and look at that data in a different way. And so really, putting the theory into practice has really helped drive the business forward, and we look much different now than we were when I came on board a year ago. And it's really thanks to this integration of the ERP system and our reporting system, and it's really helped to propel the business forward, and like I said, really improve the data-driven decision-making at Infusionsoft, which our culture is a performance culture, and there was a pent-up demand. There was almost a starvation of this type of data at our budget managers' fingertips, but we've been able to move that forward and eliminate a lot of those barriers within the organization. So with that, I believe, Ernie, we're moving back to a polling question, but I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share what my experiences.
Oh, thank you very much for that fantastic content. I'm going to go ahead and launch our second polling question as we also launch our Q&A session. So again, those of you in the audience after CPE credit, please, you have to answer all three of the polling questions. This is our second polling questions. Again, we encourage you to ask questions at any time in your questions area if you go to webinar control panel. So I'd like to direct my first question to Bill. Bill, how have you helped your clients create a culture of collaboration and engage other departments in the budgeting and planning process as firms, transform along that strategic value timeline you showed us?
Yeah, so what I'll quite often find, not always, but often find when we start off a project at a client is that the forecast process is really owned by finance initially, and that's not simply the process overall, but even the making of the assumptions, keying in the numbers into the models. And so what I've really seen be successful over time is to set up business reviews and forecast reviews cross-functionally where we bring together the various functions that are involved in the key decisions and have an agenda that is somewhat similar to first looking back at the recent business results and trying to understand what's occurred in recent history across, it could be the various lines of the P&L that the different functions are responsible for as sort of a grounding, and then using that to then go forward and inform the forecast of what the future is going to look like. With that, I've found that it's important to have the other functions own their piece of the projections and the forecast as much or more so than finance themselves. So if you can transition to the point where finance is more of a lighthouse for the process of pulling together the forecast and enabling the functions to own the inputs into the forecast, realizing finance will always play some role in the various assumptions, then at the end of the day, they're going to be much more empowered about what the impact of various decisions that they are making as a function are going to have on the financials. They're going to own the number more. And, by having the cross-functional forums, they're going to be able to begin to understand, hey, if I'm in sales and I'm going out and I'm committing to be able to sell all this product or all this service, but operations hasn't been informed as to that decision to go sell to, say, a big customer, big client, and we don't have the capacity to do it, it's easy for them to make a suboptimal decision if you don't have that cross-functional body together. And so highly recommend pulling together a regular routine of a cross-functional performance review and forecast review.
Okay, great. Eric, I'd like you to comment on that as well. There are some specific tactics, lunches, or meetings that you found successful in creating that culture of collaboration at your company?
Yeah, we have several meetings on a monthly basis. We have an executive Monday morning meeting where we get all the executives together, and once it's the second Monday of every month, we review the previous month's financial and look forward into the next month or next quarter, depending on the timing of that. But then on top of that is we are fairly, as an organization, we're fairly transparent with our financial data, and so our directors, and we review it with our directors, and we help them to understand the key drivers, and what I think one of the biggest helps to us is really driving towards having each of the directors identify where they impact the P&L. And so where their decisions, where do they impact? And so, like was the example that was used by Bill, which is, if you have a sales guy going and saying, well, this is what I'm gonna quote, or this is my quota, yet we don't have enough qualified opportunities to reach those, then both are set up for failure. But if you have good collaboration, and this is what the lead development team can produce, and this is what the sales guys, salespeople are able to produce, then there's a tighter understanding of the real key drivers of the business.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Direct my next question to Bill. In your customers, what types of KPIs and benchmarks are companies now using with all the data available? And then the second part might be on this line. How are companies incorporating external as well as internal data to define the KPIs with these advances in technology?
Yeah, so I'd say it depends on where the companies are on that continuum. If they're starting in stage 1 that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation and moving to stage 2, most of the KPIs are going to be financially focused. So it's going to be things along the lines of what's our gross margin percentage across various business units, let's say, or net income percentage, or day sales outstanding if we're looking at receivables and things of that nature. As they move along the continuum to stages 3 and 4 to integrated financial excellence, then what we start to see are a lot more of the operational drivers. So it could be a wide variety of drivers, and it really depends on the industry here, and you got to understand the underlying business model. But quite often we're going to see things like metrics around pricing, cycle times, whether it can be internal delivery of services, how long it takes to deliver those services internally, and therefore how much labor we're consuming along the way, or how costs vary against some sort of standard in the end from a bill of materials perspective. So really there's a very wide variety of appropriate KPIs, and they're going to be industry specific, and they really ought to be linked to the strategy of the company at the end of the day. And so even two companies within the same industry may have very different strategies and therefore ought to have different KPIs. But I'd say they tend to start off as more financially focused, and then as you can get more advanced, can link in more of the operational metrics. And then similar sort of thing is true in terms of the external information that is incorporated into the system. So very, very rarely, I'd say it's pretty infrequent that external data is used within the financial model, and that is typically driven by a couple factors. A, it may be very expensive to get that data, or B, it may not be super readily available on a timely basis. But those who are using it, what I tend to see it used for are things like market share, where companies have some sort of a goal, overarching goal of what they want to do from a market share perspective, and maybe have cascaded that down along particular product or service lines to say, hey, I want to be number 1 or number 2 within this particular segment from a sales perspective. And then benchmarking back against some of the SEC publicly available information in 10Ks and 10Qs to where you can begin to say, okay, what does my FTE per revenue look like, and how does that compare to peers within the industry, and then how does my gross margin growth look over time compared to other peers within the industry. So that sort of information, if you're a large enough company and have peers that file publicly 10Ks and 10Qs, that can be very good to incorporate into your models and scorecards and metrics. But generally speaking, it's relatively hard and relatively less common to have the external piece included in the modeling, although it is a good idea if you can do it.
Okay, great. Next question I will direct to Eric. You mentioned this. Can you speak to how you go about trying to understand the variances in actual versus forecast numbers, and how you've been able to reduce them more effectively given the increased visibility into the numbers since you've been there?
Well, I mean, I think variance analysis is fairly consistent across, at least in my experience with any of the companies that I was at, is really trying to have that good understanding of what were the assumptions in your budget or forecast in the first place, and then where did you deviate from those assumptions, and that's I've said many times that my job I'm wrong all the time. I'm never right. And it's just how far off I am. And so really understanding the assumptions and having good assumptions that move forward the business, and we have a good understanding of what those are. But the variance analysis that are run, especially with an integrated planning and ERP system, it becomes fairly easy to integrate back, so there's forward and backwards integration between NetSuite and adaptive planning, where a manager can look at an actual and say, well, that looks strange. What is causing that change in, if you're looking at January, February, March, and March is all of a sudden spikes, they're able to just click right in to that cell, and it takes them back into NetSuite to show them what were the components of that number. And so I was sitting down with our chief marketing officer just yesterday, and I had my laptop open, and he was looking at the numbers and said, well, what's behind that one? You just click and look at them. Oh, okay, yeah, I understand that. And so really it's looking at what makes up the actuals, and then having a good understanding of what were the assumptions and in your budget in the first place, and then you're able to really quickly say, well, I thought it was going to be X, and it ended up being Y, and this is the reason behind that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question as we ask our final question during the Q&A session, and be mindful of our time. I'll direct this one to Eric. What would you say are the greatest expected and unexpected benefits that you've realized from this integrated cloud solution?
The greatest expected benefit and unexpected benefit. So the greatest expected benefit is that single source of truth. When you have this integrated platform, if you will, that was I was excited to learn that there was that integration, because I had used ERP systems in the past that weren't integrated into a planning engine, and so it created quite a bit of headache. So that was an expected benefit. One of the unexpected benefits, I think, is the ease of the integration and how easy it is when a new account is created in the ERP system, how quickly that can be mapped and created in the planning system, and now we have it's integrated yet again. And so I think the ease of use too, especially for the adaptive planning side. I know NetSuite. I don't know NetSuite as well as I know adaptive planning, but adaptive planning for a new manager, I can sit down and then, like I said earlier, 30 to 45 minutes, I've explained how to use adaptive planning, the sheets and the tabs that they're going to be familiar with, and it's really helped to get a new manager up to speed quickly. So I think that's the unintended or the unexpected benefit.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question, and I'm going to close the Q&A session, and we will coordinate with our speakers in getting any questions that were asked that were unanswered. As a reminder, you'll be prompted to take a short survey once the webinar concludes. We appreciate your feedback regarding the event. A big thank you to Bill and Eric for their time and insights. They are clearly thought leaders in their fields and an excellent source of information on today's topic. Note that in the post-webinar survey, you'll have the opportunity to express your interest in being connected with either or both speakers and sponsors with just one or a few of the mouse clicks. And again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Adaptive Planning and NetSuite, whose commitment to thought leadership makes this possible. Finally, I'd like to thank the audience for your valuable time. We hope to see you again at another Performative event or online at www.performative.com. Make the rest of your day great, everyone.